it was pretty certain if they were doing okay in another, 8 to 12 months, they were going to be able to raise their next round. Now we're not counting on that. We're basically saying, think of this as your last money. Divide what money you have by, 18 to 24 months runway, and that's it.
Founder turned funder, from head of digital ventures of the BBC to managing director of Techstars to now managing partner of Everywhere Ventures, formerly called The Fund, with 250 portfolio companies and counting. Jenny Fielding is the ultimate community builder and investor. Together with Scott Hartley, Jenny is today pursuing a global strategy, even as US VCs have taken a step back from deals abroad, launching a new $25 million fund to be the first check-in for startups building in the future of money, health, and work. What does investing as a community mean? What do we think about the upset we're hearing about YC's new terms? How do you manage 500 limited partner investors in your fund? And what is Jenny's deepest insecurity? We cover it all and more. Get smarter, get inspired with billion-dollar moves. Jenny, I mean, you like to call yourself an empath. That was really what brought you to technology, of all things. Tell us a little bit more about, your crucible moments that got you to where you are today.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Sarah, for having me. It's really exciting to be here and love your show. So, I call myself an empath because I didn't set out to start a company. I definitely didn't set out to, be a founder. I set out to solve a problem, right? And like many founders out there, they just have this burning desire to, see the world differently. And that was my situation as I was spending nights and weekends building a technology that was going to solve a problem that I had, a pain point for myself. So I call those the empaths. So it was 2007. I would not say New York was the bastion of startup technology, and I just wanted to see this problem solved. And so I, set up in my apartment, as many founders do, bootstrapped while I still had a full-time job at a large, banking institution. And next thing you know, I'm a startup founder. Definitely was different than the plan.
Yeah, and I love that. And, actually, a lot of our listeners tuning in would have this similar predicament where they think of themselves to be entrepreneurial. But of course, even coming from Asia, where a lot of our listeners are, the expectation of success is to first, after graduation, go get a stable job, right? And get into leadership. But how did you decide that this was the time, this was the problem to double down on?
So, like many, went to law school, found myself working at a big company. And for some reason, I guess I've always fancied myself very entrepreneurial. So even though, I was working at big companies, I was always the one to start projects and push the envelope and not just kind of do the work that was in front of me, but to kind of think about what was next. So I had an entrepreneurial spirit, which sometimes can lead to you being the troublemaker at a larger organization because, people want to put you in a box or they want you just to do the work that's in front of you. But you kind of can find those little sparks in people, even in those big companies. And I was one of those people that always had the spark. And so when I decided to start my company, I didn't really know what venture capital was. There weren't really angel investors and those types of folks in New York. So when I had to raise capital, who did I go to? I went to some of my clients at the large bank who always said, "Oh, Jenny, you're so entrepreneurial, like go start a company." So a lot of my inspiration actually came from the people I surrounded myself with. And, these were large families and family offices that we were kind of managing money for, but they saw that entrepreneurial spark in me as well. So I think between that and maybe my family, who were all not tech entrepreneurs, but they both my parents worked for themselves.
So you decided to double down on the problem of international calling, as I hear it. Tell us more a little bit about that whole experience of then transitioning to become the CEO, the founder, and, the maker of your destiny ultimately.
I was trying to solve a personal problem that I had, which at the time, the iPhone had just launched, and making international calls was pretty expensive. And so a lot of my my passion really just came from the fact that I just thought it was so crazy that this very kind of this problem that really impacted many people, but was actually quite simple to solve, wasn't. And so, set out with two folks that were more technical than I was, but also saw the opportunity and started the company. So I will say that, we bootstrapped the company at first. I was working full time at a large bank as we launched the company. And at some point, as we started to get some revenue and some publicity and all these things, it was like, okay, I think you got to leave. And so that seems to be kind of a theme in my career. I also launched my own venture fund while I had a full-time job, at another venture fund. So I think my pattern is kind of in this bootstrap. And everyone says, there's a lot of talk around, well, bootstrapping. I don't necessarily, have the resources to do that. There's many ways to kind of bootstrap your business. And one is to do nights and weekends, as I, was able to do.
And tell us more about what happened then. What did you learn about yourself when you were a founder, a first-time founder?
So you have your high highs and your low lows. And I think when you work at a big company, you might have those over the course of a year or several months. You have good times and bad. As a founder, you often have that in the same day, right? You'll get this incredible customer, things will be great. All of a sudden your whole back end goes down and, you think that it's all over. So the highs and the lows are very quick and not necessarily spread out. So you definitely learn resilience, I think is one of the big learnings. And I'd say the other thing is that you have to always be kind of, thinking ahead. So solving a problem today is fine, but really thinking like, okay, what does the world look like in 5-10 years? And for us, our thesis was that, everyone was going to have a supercomputer in their pocket, which at the time when we started, most people had flip phones and they kind of thought, a phone is for calling, right? But we had this vision of like what the world looks like, down the road. And so I think always being able to see the path ahead and or articulate a world that doesn't exist is something that's fundamental. It's one of the things that I look for when I'm investing in founders. And I think I learned that firsthand, as a founder myself.
That's actually a good segue. I was going to ask you. You've sort of taken a dual role. You've been in the investor seat, you've been in the founder seat, and also actually a teacher seat, right? In Colombia as a professor. How has all of these roles informed your investing today?
When I started my company in New York, everyone said, New York's a terrible place to run a company. Go out to Silicon Valley. And I looked around, even in 2007, where there was no kind of entrepreneurial community and there was no, venture here. But I looked around and I said, okay, well, what is it? What do you need to actually start a company? So you need customers. New York has a fair amount of those. You need partners, like every multinational is based here. You need capital. So if there isn't venture capital, there's a lot of other capital in New York, right? There's, financial, banks, there's real estate, there's a lot of rich people in New York. And then there's talent, right? And there was incredible engineering schools and all types of, talent in New York. So I think my real learning was like, you can build entrepreneurial communities everywhere. You can, have incredibly large companies no matter where. And I think back in 2007, people were like, no, I think if you're going to do tech, you need to go to the Valley. And so that started to inform our thesis and why we're now called Everywhere Ventures is we believe that innovation is everywhere. Capital has been constrained in the past to places like the Valley, and now it's really kind of opening up. And so that kind of opening up is really the future. And we are hopefully a small part of that.
Yeah. And I love how you sort of picked on the communities. Of course, that is a big theme whenever I talk to someone about Jenny, the theme of community, of building community, nurturing community, of course, comes up. That's almost become a theme in your life in the many chapters, including being MD of Techstars. Tell us a little bit more about your view of community and why you're so bullish on this approach.
As I said, I started off in a community that was not really thriving. And you look at New York now, second largest tech ecosystem, and just an incredible place to run a company. But it happened to happen step by step. And so sometimes I'll run into some of the kind of old school people from back in the early 2000s, and we kind of laugh because there wasn't much there, and we just brick by brick had to build. I also had the privilege of living in London in the early 2000s as that kind of ecosystem was coming together. And I saw, all the different parts it took, the corporates that were pitching in, the VCs that started to move there, the entrepreneurs. And so, this kind of confluence of people and things has to happen. And so I've been really excited about that for a long time. And when I was at Techstars, I did something a little bit different. So most of the managing directors, who ran their programs would really focus on their ecosystems and cultivating those. And that's great. I took a very different approach, which was I used all my budget to go around the world to as many events as I could, to startup weekends, to be a judge. I mean, literally while I was at Techstars, I went everywhere. And I just met founders on the ground. I met other investors and I started developing relationships again, little by little in, 20, 30 communities. And that's really paid off, but it hasn't been this, now we're investing everywhere. This has been now a decade of my life, kind of building relationships in places around the world to kind of get the word out, to really understand, who's on the ground, who are the builders, who do we need to know, who can we support, who can we connect up with our communities. I mean, that's, I think, one of my superpowers is that, I'll meet a founder in Brazil and I'll say, oh, wow, you've got to meet one of our companies that's based in London. And so stitching together, that those communities is something that I love to do. And I think I really got a great foundation for it at Techstars, which is a worldwide network, right? So they run 50 programs around the world. And so I got to kind of experience that firsthand. And that really informed, where we are now with our fund.
Hey, by now you know that Billion Dollar Moves is proud to be part of the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals, together with other amazing podcasts like the Finding Founders podcast hosted by Sam Donner. Designed to inspire, this podcast is all about vulnerability and entrepreneurship, where you learn from the life stories of founders, activists, and hey, even drug lords. Now, one episode I highly recommend is a fun one, how a magic trick got 21 million followers. Sam interviews Sean Sotaridona, whose masterful magic tricks have garnered more than 21 million followers on TikTok and 5.44 million followers on YouTube. Guess I have a thing or two to learn there. From networking with meme accounts over Instagram DMs to performing tricks for Addison Rae, Sean's unparalleled tenacity and drive have taken him on a wild journey. Listen to Finding Founders wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm curious to know a little bit more about your learnings in building community. I think you've said this before. It's easy to say that, you're a community builder, but to actually be recognized as a community builder, that's an element of intangibility in that. What have you learned in community building? Sort of what's the secret sauce? How do you actually do this in a way that's sustainable?
Building community is hard, not to meet people, but to engage with people. And so, our biggest, the biggest challenge that we have at our fund and in general as community builders is, again, it's pretty easy to, to go around, meet interesting people, but how do you stay engaged with them in a systematic way? And so at our fund, we've taken a very technology forward approach. So we've built a suite of collaborative tools for our community, which is now 250 companies and 500 founder LPs, right? So think of it as a community of 1,000 people. We've built our tools online, and whether it's, our Slack channel, our Airtable, all of the kind of tools that we've built for our founders and our investors and our, community to engage. We think that, the future of community is really async. And that's that's how you're able to connect, global communities, is that it doesn't have to be kind of in real time in person. So we do a ton of in-person events. So we probably do one a week. But I think what really keeps people together are the discussions that are happening virtually.
So let's take a step back here. I mean, we jumped right into how you're thinking about building the fund. What's the vintage of the very, very first fund that you put together?
So the first fund was 2018. We started it in New York City, and we had 50 founder LPs support us. And the mission was really to invest in the next generation of New York-based companies. So that was our kind of pilot to see, hey, will this actually work? And that fund has been around for now 5 years, fully deployed. And I can tell you it's an incredible fund. We have, just beautiful, amazing companies that are, rising stars in their categories. And we've been just so lucky to support that community. And so as things were starting to work, we kind of looked at each other and we said, I wonder, if we can do this other places. We were getting hundreds and hundreds of emails from founders around the world saying, I love this by founder for founder ethos in the community and the fund that you've built. Love to get involved in something here, kind of fill in the blank. And we were getting, inquiries from founders around the world. And so finally, my co-founder and I thought, well, you know what, if there's pull, right, as opposed to push, maybe this can work in other places. So our second fund, which is a 2020 vintage, we have about 10 or 12 locations around the world where we've activated nodes of founders, same format where we have local founder LPs supporting the next generation of local founders. And we, use that through a distributed venture partner model that works pretty well. So that was kind of our second fund, was based on that premise. And we learned a lot going global quite quickly. And I think that's informed really where we are today.
So this model, I mean, you this is your work every day, but this is not a traditional VC model, right? Where you have what you even call founder LPs. I mean, we see sort of Endeavor do versions of this, but of course, again, they have a rules-based fund that's slightly different, but it is built on community. Where they do get their founders to invest as well. How were you thinking about, I guess, the role of the founder LPs? Were they actively sourcing for you?
Yeah, I mean, our thesis was that, if you have people that are contributors, then you're not just going to get, money out of them, but you're going to get support, right? And so the support that our LPs are able to offer is, kind of twofold. First is that they're the top of the funnel, right? So they're in their geographies, they're seeing interesting companies, and they're able to surf it to us while we're not there, right? So I may not be in Egypt, but we're seeing really interesting deal flow from Egypt because we have, LPs there that are founders on the ground, builders, and they're seeing what's happening in their community. So top of the funnel, really important. The second is diligence, right? Again, harder for me to diligence a company in Egypt because I'm not there. I'm not part of those networks. But if we've got a community of, 20, 30 founders on the ground, they can quickly help us triangulate who the people are. Because again, we're in the people business at this stage. We're doing pre-seed investing, so super early. Right. So having boots on the ground is like critical. But we don't want to have boots on the ground that, are that we hire, right? We want those people to be part of our community. Those people have all given us cash, or we've given them money as founders. So we create these kind of nodes in different places where they're top of the funnel, and then their diligence. And then the last piece is that they help us support the portfolio because they're obviously in those locations.
Sounds simple, but it's of course very complex, right? To be managing all these different nodes. And I guess it's in the core team that is sort of your HQ. How many people do you have? It's you, Scott, and a couple of associates?
Yes, I've got one co-founder, Scott, and then we have two folks on our team, a head of community and a head of operations. And then we've got about 32 venture partners around the world. And those are kind of our eyes and ears on the ground and help us galvanize, the communities in those places. So to give you an example, South by Southwest, for example, happens in Austin, Texas. So for South by Southwest, we've got probably 40 or 50 founder LPs in Texas. And we have a portfolio of about a dozen companies there. And so we decided what we wanted to do for South by was we wanted to hold office hours so that we could, meet other people in the community. We hosted office hours for underrepresented founders. We want more diverse founders in our portfolio. Now, this was all organized by our team on the ground. So they were able to get a sponsor for this because there was a big lunch. They were able to, put up all of the, the infrastructure that would need to happen, which is an office, a submission form, all this kinds of stuff. And they were able to do the office hours. Now, Scott and I were not at South by Southwest this year, sad for us, but it's amazing that we can have high impact events and community and interactions and not actually have to be there. And so what we're trying to pioneer is something that we call the many to many model as opposed to one to many. So traditional venture capital is, you have one GP, you have two GPs, and then you've got a portfolio, and everyone has to support the portfolio. And that's really hard to add value. What we have is we have a community of 500 people, and they're supporting a large portfolio. So we call it a many-to-many model as opposed to a one-to-many. It's not Jenny and Scott supporting a portfolio of 250. It's this massive community of 500, 700 founders that are supporting that larger portfolio. So it's kind of just a different way to think about it.
Yeah, and I love that. And how are they incentivized? Is there a carry interest that's structured as part of this deal with them?
So we have venture partners who are participate in our carry, but otherwise our LPs are not.
Well, they're invested to see as LPs, right? To see the investment do well.
Correct.
Yeah, love it. Well, you're definitely taking a different approach, and I think that definitely is your secret sauce there, and love how you're galvanizing truly a community to do this. But what were some of your challenges? What were some of your learnings if you were to sort of speak to a new GP coming into the fold here?
Our biggest challenge was going from all founder supported, so Fund 1 and Fund 2, all founder capital, to Fund 3 is probably 75% founder capital, 25% family offices and fund of funds. And, as you raise a larger funds, we just announced our $25 million Fund 3. As you raise larger funds, you have to take in larger checks as well. And so that comes with more complexity, more expectations, and kind of just a different format. So I think as we were fundraising, although we raised the funds quite quickly, we raised in about 10 weeks, we spoke to a lot of more institutional investors, and a lot of them really didn't understand the model, or they just wanted to see the old model, right? So kind of the mentality, you don't get fired for investing or buying IBM or whatever that saying is, right? So, they're deploying capital on behalf of families and other institutions. And so if the model worked before, kind of looking like a traditional seed fund, two GPs, 25 investments, kind of there's a formula. Why shake up the formula? So I think that was our biggest challenge. What was good about that, actually, Sarah, was that people either get it and love it, or they just don't like it. And so I think a lot of fund managers kind of get the runaround from LPs and they get strung along. And we don't actually get that so much. Like, people get it and they want to be part of this kind of new wave, or they think it's too radical and they don't like it. And so we can, just part ways.
Are you sick and tired of wasting your precious time on tedious tasks like pulling reports, rewriting blog posts, and trying to personalize countless prospecting emails? Well, say no more, because I've got some new AI tools that are gonna blow your mind. Introducing HubSpot's newest AI tools, Content Assistant and Chatbot. Content Assistant uses the power of OpenAI's GPT-3 model to help you create content outlines, outreach emails, and even web page copy in just seconds. And in case that wasn't enough, they created Chatbot, a conversational growth assistant that connects your HubSpot CRM for unbeatable support. With chat-based commands, you can manage contacts, run reports, and even ask for status updates. The easy-to-use CRM just got even easier. Head to HubSpot.com/artificial-intelligence to get early access today. What you really want when you're out in the market there fundraising is you want to get a quick no. A quick yes,
Yeah.
or a quick no. I mean, the critique of LPs is that it's very opaque. You meet one family office, it's one family office. And that's part of the work that we do, and really trying to build transparency to that. So tell us a little bit more now, about the thesis and how you've honed into it. I was looking at your portfolio with the fund, it was very much a generalist view and somewhat still is. And you going at it in a way where when the markets petered out on looking beyond domestic markets, you are actually going global. Tell us a little bit about the thesis and your belief on where the world's heading.
Yeah. So definitely never taking an easy path, right? We could be doubling down on the US. The truth is about 70% of our investments are North America right now, and about 30% are rest of world. So it's not quite as radical as it sounds, but we're huge believers that emerging markets are, going to be driving a lot of the innovation and the opportunity, right? And so we're not investing, we're pre-seed investors, first check in. So we're not investing for what's happening today. Our view is that in the next 5-10 years, these markets will, be even bigger and stronger and dominant in some ways, right? And so we're kind of investing for the future. So that's where we stand in terms of kind of our global framework. And then we looked across our portfolio of 200 plus companies, and we said, okay, where are the outliers coming from and why? And so they directionally fell into three buckets, which I call the table stakes economy. What do you actually need to live? And so we distill that down to money, health, and work. We are doubling down in this fund 3 on those verticals. Directionally, fintech. We've always been, big believers that, every company is going to be a fintech company. Digital health, right? We think that's, very important shift that's happening, and obviously just important for the world. And then the last one, future of work, which for us is really about, automation. And whether that's vertical SaaS or new modalities of kind of, work, we think that that's, very technology driven, and we're excited about that category as well. So that's where we're focused for Fund 3, and kind of maps to where we've seen a lot of success in the portfolio.
When you think about your outliers, and I'm thinking about, companies like Headway here that was backed by Andreessen, right? And something I think it was 100x from your entry valuation. So congrats to that. When you think about some of your outliers, what were the, I guess, common characteristics?
What's interesting about our Fund 1 is it's not necessarily one or two companies that are driving our top performance there. It's really about a dozen companies. I'd say the common thread is one, they have this view of the world, right, that may not exist. And so they're kind of talking about where things are going, not necessarily where things are. The second is that they're resilient. A lot of these folks have not had, the quintessential easy life. Actually, most of them haven't, gone to Harvard and Stanford and all these things. They've had to really claw their way to where they are, and that's built a lot of, resilience. And so I think, those are kind of the two drivers. And then I'd say the last one, which is important, is, we're looking for these fast founders that respond, quickly to data. So it's not about, being coachable or listening to what I say. It's about, okay, like you might be an empath and really like feel like this product needs to exist, but you have to go by the data, right? And if the data is pointing you in one direction, you need to quickly be able to, turn your focus there. And so I think those are the three characteristics we're looking for in founders, and they've really mapped to some of our outliers. We have one company, a founder who's from Venezuela, right? And he, had to leave essentially because he couldn't live in the country anymore. And his family, he had challenges getting his family out. And so just that resilience to, still be the optimist that he is, to come to the US, to have to start again, and to, build his skill set, build his language learning, like all these things were really hard. But it's gotten him to this place. So I think we love, founders with that type of DNA.
Absolutely. And actually immigrant founders, I was looking at a fund deck recently, and it's a high percentage of immigrant founders that are in the top quartile of, top performing startups. So definitely, grit and resilience there is important. Now I want to turn tact a little bit, because you're investing in such an early stage. One of the recent, rumblings around this stage is the valuations, the new terms that Y Combinator has put out there. What are your thoughts on that?
It's not really as bad as most people are saying, I think. They're offering $500,000, which is a lot of money to get your business off the ground. And if that crowds out some other investors, then, I think that's fine, right? Investors have to earn their spot on your cap table. So I'm not so worried about it. I think it's, it's good for founders. And that the market really has gotten quite frothy. And then I think many founders would be happy with that deal kind of going forward as, capital gets more constrained.
And speaking of capital constraint, I mean, this is an interesting time. What was the Silicon Valley bank run and, the banking issues that are starting to unfold? There will be long-term issues that will come out from this. What are your thoughts on, what happened there and how this will impact venture moving forward?
Well, I think someone should start a next gen amazing founder focused venture debt fund, because there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. Silicon Valley Bank really was a huge supporter of founders, resources, banking products, and then of course venture debt. And so, when the venture debt went away, I feel like that leaves a huge hole. In terms of SVB, obviously it was quite, traumatic for many people. About a third of our portfolio, so a third of our 250 companies were banking at SVB, so that was quite scary. We ourselves had an SVB account, although we didn't have the majority of our funds there, but it did impact us as well. I think it all just gave us a bit of pause in terms of things move really fast in startup world, and something that we took for granted, which is just where you're banking, right? Your basic governance is now kind of come back to the forefront. So it's some of the questions that we're now asking founders, trying to support founders with, to make sure that their infrastructure is sound, right? So I think it was a scary moment. I think we all learned a hard lesson about diversification.
And I mean, because you have this unique global view, and this was very much a US issue that definitely created fear. I mean, I was getting texts from a lot of the LPs that we work with that were, global investors, thinking about what the trickle down effect would be as well. What did you say to your LPs, I guess, as you were dealing with this issue on how this will impact the market, the work that you do?
It's not really what we said to LPs, but it's how we said it. Very quick to mobilize. We spun up a Slack channel. We had hundreds of messages from our founders being exchanged within minutes. We were trying to get information to our founders. We were being very communicative with our LPs, assuring them that our cash actually was not at risk, but that we were, of course, working with our founders. So I think in these situations, you really can kind of step up and you see who the leaders are and who are not. And I felt like we did a pretty good job taking a leadership position, trying to support our founders, and just being very communicative with our LPs. And our LPs were just wonderful and just very supportive.
Has market sentiment, I mean, everything from the discussion around TikTok to putting a lens on where technology is heading, the valuations being a lot lower than they were during the sort of height of the froth, and combined with all these issues that we're dealing with, how has the market sentiment informed, how are you thinking about your investing moving forward?
I mean, the truth is, as of today, April, in the early stage pre-seed and seed, we haven't seen valuations come down very much. I think we've seen some other trends, rounds taking longer to close, and some other things that we need to be careful about. But we haven't really seen a compression at the early stage. So for us, it's business as usual. We're pretty actively deploying. I think we're closing 2 or 3 of our core checks just this month. So we think it's a great time to invest, but I think we're so early, and so you have to, we're not market timers, so we're not trying to say like, oh, we got in at a 8 instead of a 10 or a 6 instead of an 8. Like, we're getting in early. We're trying to invest in, massive opportunities that can be multi-billion-dollar companies. And for us, getting in early is good enough. We don't necessarily have to try to time the market, which I think some investors I hear are trying to do by not deploying because they think prices will be compressed. So I think the thing that we are trying to do is make sure that our founders are adequately capitalized, whereas the last few years, we haven't had to worry about that as much, right? So if the founder got a pre-seed round together, it was pretty certain if they were doing okay in another, 8 to 12 months, they were going to be able to raise their next round. Now we're not counting on that. We're basically saying, think of this as your last money. Divide what money you have by, 18 to 24 months runway. And that's it. That's all you have to spend. And you need to hit the milestones, whatever those are for your particular industry, to get to the next level.
That makes a lot of sense, and I love how you put that statement out. Think of this as your last check and make it work. I love that because, like you said, right back in the day, first of all, you don't think that wherever you put your money, I mean, times have changed drastically, right? You don't think about the bank, possibly losing the money that you put in there.
Right.
And then also the fact that, people that used to hit the milestones would expect, okay, I'm going to raise again in the next 12 months, right? So that has certainly changed the narrative here.
I need this amount of money to run the business. I'm like, well, you got to figure out how to do it on half because you got to make that runway last. So, really focused on being lean right now and having at least an eye to what a sustainable business looks like if you can't raise venture capital.
Interesting times indeed. And I have some interesting questions to follow. These are quick fire type questions. So first thing that comes to mind, $1 billion questions for Jenny Fielding. Are you ready, Jenny?
Sure.
All right. What do people get wrong about you?
They think I'm kind of harsh, but I'm actually like a softie at heart. I just have a harsh exterior.
Okay. What keeps you up at night still?
Worrying that some really good founders are not going to be able to get funded in this environment.
A moment you felt like giving up?
When I was running my startup, I had some really dark moments, including some hard discussions with co-founders, with investors. And I just thought, wow, I don't know if this is worth it.
What is the hardest discussion that you've ever had to have?
Parting ways with a co-founder.
What did you learn from that?
That you probably have waited too long. As hard as it is, you like to give people a chance, but at the end of the day, mostly when you need to, part ways or fire someone, you've probably waited too long.
What's an opinion you have that most people don't agree with?
That you can have, a massive opportunity, a huge fund, and still invest globally as two people.
I love it. A habit that you have that has changed your life, or that you've picked up recently that has changed your life?
I started running again. So I hadn't run after many years because of an injury, but I'm just loving it. Endorphins are great. And it just really gives me a lot of energy.
What's your morning routine on that note?
Well, I try to run not too often, but, probably three days a week. Otherwise, Pilates, walking, just exercise, getting out. So even in the freezing cold New York, I'm always walking everywhere.
What's your biggest insecurity?
That I don't know if I'm good at this job. Because, it takes a long time to see returns, right? When you're the first check-in. So we're investing for the future. So I'm always insecure that, maybe Jenny, you're just not that good at this. You should go back to, starting companies, running companies.
That's the hardest, because the feedback loop of venture, first of all, is a long one, right? I mean, it's between the funds and being the first check-in, as you said. Well, keep at it. I mean, I hope you feel that every day with the founders that you work with, that you are building towards something truly great here. I think, finally, what makes you happy?
That's a good one. I think just doing the work that I love. Like, I'm someone that even when there's like this week taxes to do, I wake up every morning and I kind of look in the mirror and I'm like, wow, I have the best job in the world. I get to meet with people that are 10 times smarter than me, so passionate about what they're doing, trying to change the world. And like, that's the coolest job anyone could ever have.
And with that, what is your final advice to a next generation leader, a GP, or a founder that's tuning in on how they should lead their life?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've never taken a traditional path. I've always had to, kind of operate at my speed. And so I would just say, like, you don't have to be a cookie cutter. You don't have to take the same path that everyone is telling you. And so, find what you're passionate about and figure out how you're going to get there. But the path to that may not be linear.
Love that. Well, Jenny, that was an excellent point to end on. Progress is never linear, and you should never compare yourself to someone's chapter 10 when you're at chapter 1, as I hear it. But I'm really grateful for your time and really excited for the $1 billion moves that I know you will make.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. This was really fun.
Thanks, Jenny.
And thanks so much for tuning in this week. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow our socials on Sarah Chen Global to get the latest on the show. It would really help me out too if you enjoyed this to rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts and share your favorite episodes with a friend. I'm Sarah Chen-Spellings, and you've been listening to $1 Billion Moves.